I know more folks are coming into the webinar. We're just waiting for more folks to get on. We are officially live on Black Youth Project, on BYP 100, on Twitter, on Facebook. So if y'all could go to Twitter, Facebook, share those lives out to all your people. We are so excited to be talking about directly confronting the state during the 2020 uprising. We will get started in a couple minutes. Welcome, everyone. One time for one DC, BLM repping the DMV. Two-stepping on an equities. I bet you man brought to BYP. March with a lean cause I keep it so fresh. All liberties imminent, I protest. My history marks the S on my chest. Till the po-po, we ain't taking no rest. We protest with no stress. Systemic protest. City aiming for the top and no rest, nigga. You feel me? We taking down this whole city, nigga. You feel me? We taking down this whole city. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. Ella Baker was she taught us how to fight. Say what? So we gon' fight all day and night until we get it right. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. Marsha P. Johnson was a fighter and she taught us how to fight. Say what? So we gon' fight all day and night until we get it right. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. Sada Shakur. Taught us how to fight. Say what? So we gon' fight all day and night until we get it right. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. Corinne Gaines was a fighter and she taught us how to fight. Say what? So we gon' fight all day and night until we get it right. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side. I said I love being black. 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 I love the color of my skin. I love the color of my skin. This is the skin that I'm in. This is the skin that I'm in. Said I love being black. I 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 love the texture of my hair. I love the texture of my hair. And I rock it everywhere. And I rock it everywhere. I said I love being black. All right, that's enough of that. Welcome, everyone, to Directly Confronting the State. My name is Jonathan Likes. I will be your co-host along with Terry Smith. Terry, talk to the people.
What's up? What's up? Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Like Jonathan said, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just want to take a second to thank you all for joining us. And I also want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank Rodney and Rory, who are providing ASL interpretation for us tonight. Thank you both so much. We truly appreciate you. So before we get into it, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge our peers and our colleagues who are throwing down in the streets and those who have just been taking action in whatever way they can. And so now I just want to say a little bit about the type of space that we've acknowledged and envisioned for this webinar. So the Data Liberation Project is a collaboration of the efforts of the Gen Forward Survey and Black Youth Project. And in short, Gen Forward is a first of its kind survey of 18 to 36-year-olds that focuses on issues of importance to African American, Latinx, and Asian American young adults. And Black Youth Project is a digital platform that is meant to amplify the voices of young Black people, and is especially interested in understanding what new factors help to shape or sort of contribute to the social and political attitudes and behaviors of Black youth. So we've merged these two to create what we're calling the Data Liberation Project, and we'll be holding bi-monthly webinars. And so the ultimate purpose of this project is twofold. First, we hope to sort of liberate data from the grips of academia, and also to prevent it from being siloed within the academy. And perhaps more importantly, we hope that this project will sort of further the use of data as a liberating tool for marginalized folks. So to achieve these goals, we want to think sort of with and among activists and organizers and all who are invested in the liberation of marginalized people. So we piloted this project in June when we held our first webinar and discussed what we called COVID-capitalism, which ultimately was a discussion about sort of the vulnerabilities of capitalism and the radical possibilities that sort of emerged in the context of movement work. If you were unable to make it, or if you just want to share it with your friends, you can find the video on the Data Liberation Project YouTube channel. So let me say a little bit about this webinar and sort of what we want to do here, and then we can go ahead and get to know our panelists. So in this space, what we hope to do broadly is to think about the myriad of ways that youth are engaging in a politics of agitation and disruption. And I guess more specifically, we want to break down, sort of unpack what direct action looks like in this moment. So what does it mean that youth are burning cop cars in the street? And how might we think of the state's insistence on the protection of property over people? So we've brought together this group of organizers and activists in order to sort of think about shaping politics, the promises of direct action, and also radically reimagining politics. So with that being said, Jonathan, I'll turn it back over to you to go ahead and introduce our panelists, and then we can go ahead and dive in.
All right, so I am super excited about our panelists today, y'all, for very specific reasons. These are three people that I consider to be movement family. These are folks that have not just started throwing down during the 2020 uprising. These are folks who have been throwing down for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They are on the front lines of organizing across the country, in Minnesota, in Atlanta, in New York, and beyond. So I'm gonna read their bios because I think y'all really need to dig into like the background of these folks. So first, my sister and fellow comrade, Mary Hooks, is the director of Southerners on New Ground, is a political home for LGBTQ liberation across the lines of race, class, ability, age, culture, gender, and sexuality all across the South. Southerners on New Ground builds, sustains, and connects a Southern regional base of LGBTQ people in order to transform the region through strategic projects and campaigns developed in response to the current conditions of our community. Song builds this movement through leadership development, coalition and alliance building, intersectional analysis, and organizing. Mary Hooks is a Black lesbian feminist mother, organizer, and co-director of Song. Mary joined Song as a member in 2009 and began organizing with Song in 2010. Mary's commitment to Black liberation, which encompasses the liberation of LGBTQ folks, is rooted in her experiences growing up under the impacts of the war on drugs. Her people are migrants of the Great Migration, factory workers, church folk, Black women, hustlers, addicts, dykes, studs, femmes, queens, and all the people fighting for liberation of oppressed people. And, you know, we're gonna really get into the mandate. I'm gonna play it for y'all later, but if y'all haven't heard about the mandate, haven't heard the origin story, we might just be lucky enough to get Mary to share with us the origins of the mandate. But it has been a mantra and a chant that has struck the hearts and minds throughout the movement for Black lives. And we are really, really proud and honored to have Mary here with us tonight. All right, next we have my sister, Sandy Nurse. Sandy and I lived at an occupation encampment outside of New York City Hall for a very long time this summer. But that's not my first time throwing down with Sandy. Sandy and I have been throwing down for the last 5 years. Sandy's a community organizer, a direct action trainer, a carpenter based in Brooklyn, New York. Sandy is the founder of BKROT, a co-founder of Mayday Space, a direct action organizer. She spent nearly a decade working to create alternative institutions we need for positive social change while confronting power in the streets. Sandy is also out here talking about land, out here farming, out here making sure we can sustain ourselves and co-govern ourselves from now into infinity and beyond. If y'all, wherever y'all are, y'all just need to snap it up for both Mary and Sandy. And finally, my sibling, Aluchi Omiago, is a Minnesota-born trans LGBTQ organizer who still lives and organizes in Minneapolis today. Oluchi is a co-founder of and core team member of Black Visions, a Black-led local organization that centers Black, queer, and trans folks in Minnesota. Black Visions Collective has also been in existence for more than 3 years and has already made interventions in citywide politics and in global politics. Together with other abolitionist organizations, they diverted over $1 million from the police budget in 2018. Like I said, this is not new work. Folks have been doing this way beyond 2020. This year, Black Visions called to defund police after the brutal murder of George Floyd, which catapulted the conversation around safety and abolition to a national stage. Alusi is also a senior organizer and co-founder of the Black LGBTQ+ Migrant Project, or BLMP. BLMP is focused on bringing the most marginalized folks together to work toward liberation. In their organizing work, they center transformative justice. I'm definitely gonna ask Aluchi to break down the difference between punitive, restorative, and transformative justice systems for y'all, because they do it oh so well. And those voices who are not heard. When not busy organizing, Aluchi loves watching YouTube unboxings and religiously watches anime. I didn't even know that part. So stab it up for our panelists, Mary, Aluchi, and Sandy this evening. So let me turn it back to Terry to get us started.
Yeah, thank you again to our amazing panelists. I can't wait to chat with you all. So before we do that, a little logistical note. We're going to start with some questions that we want to discuss with the panelists. Then we're going to take a moment and pivot to some data from the Jim Ford survey and sort of discuss and think through its implications. And then we'll take questions from our viewers. So feel free to send in your questions as they come to you. In order to do so, just go ahead and put it in the chat box, whether you're watching here on Zoom, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you're watching, go ahead and send those questions in and we'll get to those at the end. So Jonathan, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
Sure, absolutely. So we're gonna start off with my beloved sister Mary Hooks. And yo, I'm gonna play this joint one quick time. Let me know, thumbs up if y'all can hear this. This ain't what I'm playing. Can y'all hear this?
Oh, mama, mama, can't you see?
Okay, so now I can play what I really want to play for y'all.
Can't you see what the system's done to me?
The mandate for Black people in this time.
The mandate for Black people in this
Is
time
to avenge the suffering of our ancestors.
is to avenge the suffering of our ancestors.
To earn the respect of future generations.
To earn the respect of future generations.
And to be willing to be transformed in the service of the work.
And to be willing to be transformed in the service of the work.
So Mary, please, thank you for your words. We appreciate you. We have thrown down in direct action organizing over this summer, both with some of the street art in Atlanta. So I really just want to talk about opening it up with the mandate. I thought it very appropriate to open this conversation up with that chant that you so graciously put on the Black Joy Experience album. But can you talk about the origins of that chant and how does that chant connect to the importance of us directly confronting the state?
Ashe, thank you so much for everybody for inviting me to come hang and kick it with y'all at Talk Shop. One of my favorite things is to scheme and dream and to do, and everybody who watching and tuning in and stuff. The mandate, I'll get right into it. But one, I like to always start by saying that song inside of our organizing, inside of organization, that question, are you willing to be transformed in the service of the work, has been something that song has asked for decades of each other. Like when we in the midst of a hard moment, when we're feeling confused or whatever, it's like, are you willing, though, to be transformed in the service of the work? And that has been one of the things that helps ground and shape our posture in terms of, all right, let's keep going, you know? And this was a few years ago. Sometimes I have to relate it to her because I remember exactly where I was sitting when Spirit spoke it. Years ago when it came and just landed in my heart real strong. And I believe many people take, you know, a lot of different things from when they hear the mandate and they read the words. But for me, when I chew on those things, I think about the avenging of the suffering of our ancestors. And I feel like for Black people, we know that when we think about who we're connected to, that we don't just fight for our current reality, like the suffering of our people is very much alive and well and in our bones, as well as their joy. So in the midst of avenging their suffering, it is about saying that we are clear that we are kidnapped people in these colonized states of America. Make no mistake about it. And so our relationship to empire and then the way in which we confront empire must reflect that understanding. And then I also think the avenging of this suffering is also about Black joy as well, because we know our people have suffered. And so we also know that part of, you know, what we can also manifest is some love and joy to be, and to also in healing, which is also necessary because of that grave suffering at the hands of this empire. And I think that because, you know, in African tradition, you think about Sankofa and what it means to make decisions, to act, and to think about 7 generations that have come before you, 7 generations that will come after, that our work and the work that we're trying to build now must be reflective of that we have considered and thought carefully about what it is we're leaving for the next generation. And I know, like, you know, even my kid, when all the sacrifices that she makes and that she has to experience because her mama is an organizer, you know, I'm like, I have to do work that's worthy of her sacrifice, you know? I have to, like, if mommy not gonna be here, if mommy, like, you know, it gotta be worth it. We gotta put up fights that's worth it for our people. And so I think that for Black people, we also know, again, as colonized people, we must be transformed. We can't stay in our current shape and continue to agitate. What is our culture? What is the values that we have? How do we want to be as people outside of the, you know, what it means to be colonized and having to be up inside of American culture, which is co-opted and all these other things. And so it's a lot. I can, like, literally, I can feel the warmth in my body when I think about it and talk about it. And oftentimes when I hear it or I watch it, I'm like, that's not me talking. I just feel like, you know, I'm witnessing it like other people, you know, because it just resonates in a very particular way.
Thank you so much, Mary. Not only has it resonated with you, but it has literally resonated with movement builders all around the world. So thank you for gifting us with that chant, the mandate, and we want to thank the ancestors for speaking through you. So we appreciate that. Moving on to my sister, Sandy. Sandy, you have been training folks in direct action organizing for, I don't even know how long, for a long time. One of the originators of Occupy Wall Street. You have just been a part of so many movements over the years. Can you just talk about what does it mean for us to use our bodies, to tuck our bodies in places so the wheels don't turn? And what does that particularly mean in 2020 as, you know, we are, 2 months and some change away from probably one of the most important elections of our lives. So you can make references to the New York City Hall occupation, but I know you have such a long wealth of information when it comes to directly confronting the state with our bodies. So make those connections for our audience. What is direct action organizing and how do you employ that in this time?
Big question. Well, one, thank you all for inviting me for this. It's so great to be in community with all of you at different points in time, and this opportunity connects here. You know, to speak to your question, direct action was how I got involved in movements. I was someone who grew up as like a military child. I grew up all around the world. And I had gone on different paths of like doing nonprofit work, working at the United Nations. And these just kept hitting walls and kept having experiences that were dehumanizing and witnessing people being dehumanized. And when I was looking for something else, what actually I started to feel myself, like I started to feel like I could grow into my skin when I was participating in actions. And when I felt like the rage and anger and frustration and hurt that I was feeling was channeled into something active and physical, it always felt like for me, we are creating the energy, we are creating the power in streets that gets picked up and used and allows people to move things forward. So it felt like a place where you could play around with things, you could rage out in ways that you couldn't in other ways at your job or in your family or in all of these other places that we're at. And so I found myself just really in love with being in the streets. I found myself loving those moments when people are, do an action for the first time and they feel, they get that excitement, they get over the rush of the fear, the anxiety, the physical anxiety in your body you feel when you're doing an action, and then how that kind of, once you put yourself out there and put yourself on the line and get involved, it kind of goes away and you start to lose that fear. You start to find yourself building deep bonds with people that you just met 2 weeks ago or you just met a month ago, and you're like, suddenly you have this trust with them to do some outrageous stuff, right? So there's so much power in direct action, I think, both at the level of overcoming physical fear of state violence in some ways, and also the emotional and mental shackles that prevent us from feeling like we have the ability to change or impact things. And so, Jonathan and I saw this directly in the encampment at City Hall, where in this kind of space that we created that was a direct action, we saw many people for the first time step into participating in a direct action, feeling empowered, all of that rage, all of that anger coming out, just pouring out into this space, this kind of like open wound that we were able to, have. And many people are now, organizing their own actions, organizing their own marches. So direct action is a space for liberatory expression, steps to moving into understanding a worldview, and really an opportunity to find people and find a whole new family that you never even knew existed, who are gonna school you so hard, and you're gonna school them so hard, and you're gonna do some really cool stuff together. So in this moment, I think what we're seeing is just a tremendous moment of power shifts and power transitions that are deeply consequential for us. And so the level of violence, political violence in our system, institutional violence that has been brought to bear on all of us is being pushed back on yet again in a way that is not able to be polite or controlled or sanitary. Like, it's just full rage. So yeah, I'll stop there, but I just think that direct action is the way right now to really be pushing back as much as possible, particularly in this next few months.
Thank you so much. Rage has definitely been a theme of this year, what I want to call an ancestral rage for liberation, rage with the cause. And towards that goal, Aluchi, we move into you. Let me just pull this up one quick time. because we ain't playing these games in 2020 as we think about young activists on the front lines directly confronting the state. So can you talk about what does it mean from a Minneapolis context for the city council to actually declare that they will abolish the police and create a new system of public safety? Talk about what the momentum on the ground was to build up to that moment, and what does it mean for us to look back and finally be living in a moment where you all might be the first city in the world to say we're going to abolish the police, even if it doesn't happen. The fact that the city councils have declared that is taking us one step forward. Can you just talk about that moment in the context of local Minneapolis organizing? And I would not go leave this picture up here the whole time. I just wanted people to see it.
Yeah, I think that this question definitely dovetails very well with the response from the other question, because none of this would have happened unless young Black folks weren't on the ground putting their bodies on the line, right? And I think it's really interesting because regardless of how the demand shifted conversation, like that demand wouldn't have gone anywhere if folks weren't actually on the ground putting their bodies on the line, right? And especially in the time of COVID, what we saw was we put a call out and we put a hashtag out, defund police, and that got national, global, whatever attention very quickly. But what we saw that actually created the societal shifts that we're seeing right now is that people were out on the streets actually activating that rage that we're talking about, right? So like, what does it mean to have a demand and then follow that demand through with action? So just to put folks in context of like actually what happened, when we put the call out to defund police, we actually told people to call Jacob Fry, who's our mayor, and tell him that we want a divestment from the Minneapolis Police Department. He actually had no action. He didn't do anything. And then 2 days afterwards, this was before the 3rd precinct burned down, we put a call out to our city council and we said, these are the 4 things that we want you to pledge to do. These were actually not as radical as defund or abolish the police. It was like divest like some 20% out of the police budget, vow to never, and stop the police brutality on protesters and folks who are, as we've later saw, we saw that they all denied it. They didn't respond, they didn't do anything. And it was only after the 3rd precinct burned down, that Target burned down, that we saw that like shit was shifting, that they were actually like, okay, this is something that we can move towards, right? And that then led them to like actually force to be like, not necessarily forced, but they wanted to work with us because they knew that this was something that they couldn't just glaze over and like it'll all fix itself, right? People on the ground were activated and they were activated towards something. And that something, right, wasn't just, oh, we want to see this specific officer arrested, we want accountability, this is like a one-off thing. It was like, actually, people are calling into question the validity of the entire system, and they're asking for an abolition of the entire system, right? So they had to do something, regardless of if they follow through with that, that was actually in response to what was happening on the ground. So we were able to have them pledge to actually completely defund and dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department. And then afterwards, after it was ratified, and it was actually ratified by every single council member, we were able to like have them change the city's charter so that the Minneapolis Police Department was not a charter department. So even starting that process is progress, regardless of if that goes through, if they actually defund the Minneapolis Police Department or not. The fact that we got a city council to unanimously decide to dismantle and completely abolish the Minneapolis Police Department was a step in the right direction.
Ashe, Ashe. All right, I'm kicking it to Terry now. Thank you, Aluchi. That was so powerful.
Thank you all for sharing those experiences and like just making evident the need for direct action in this moment. So I think this next question not only helps us to further realize that utility and necessity, but to really just drive home this point. And so I just want to ask you, what has radical direct action sort of made possible in this moment that wasn't possible before? And I guess in other words, what is the radical potential of direct action as you see it? And anyone can take this question.
I have a few thoughts. Shocker.
Let's hear it.
But I think that one, I think it shows for folk who might not be organized to engage in like protests. But when you see direct action happen, especially when folks bring the art, when it bring the creativity, like all of that, like that's when you start tapping into folks' hearts and minds. When people can start feeling a thing based on what you show, what they hear, what they see. And that's where I believe that there's openings for the hearts and mind shifts, because real talk, that's what we after, especially for Black people. We after hearts and minds, period. You know what I mean? And I think that what that also opens up a door to is us to be able to tell different types of stories, right? Our actions can certainly be confrontational, right? I think about when that was 2016, I think that was 2016 when the video that people often see with the mandate, it was an action that we had planned, and somebody had was recording, and so they ended up cutting the video, but that wasn't part of the plan. Like it wasn't, and we were going to do a press conference on the highway. We were like, "Won't get these can I cuss? I cuss. We're gonna get these motherfuckers in the morning time." You know what I mean? Make capitalism late for work type shit. And then the fuzz found out, helicopters stormed us, all kind of shit. But I think what it does though, I think it allows us to open up people's political imagination on the way in which we can use our bodies, the way in which we can tell our stories different, the tools, the props, you know what I mean, are all ways that I feel like we're looking for what people gonna feel, you know what I mean, and what people feel, and then what then will ignite them to do ongoing and long term. And I think that direct action is also a place where we can like articulate our vision of the world we want to create, So it is also about confronting, but direct action can also be used depending on where you do it and how you do it as a way to actually be like, they're doing it wrong out there, in the courtroom, but out here, this is what we're showing, you know what I mean, how things should be done. And so I feel like those are some of the things that we've kept in mind as we've engaged in work, here in Atlanta, but other parts of the South where we do work, in terms of how do we also think about actions being a lens by which people can see the changes in the world that sometimes it's hard to articulate. People hear defund and get all nervous and shit. But when you say like, oh, here's a scenario, rather using guerrilla theater or what have you, that gives people an opportunity to say, oh, okay, so this is what this could look like and feel like. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I deeply resonate.
Go on, Aluchi. Go on.
Oh yeah, I deeply resonate with what Mary says. I like to think of direct action as the purest form of emotion in the face of inequity and oppression, right? So it's like, how are we actually displaying the emotion, the rage, the healing, the joy? Like, direct actions can be joyous, right? Like, I remember our shutdown of Mall of America was very joyous. We started singing. It was emotional. It was beautiful. People were crying, right? So it's like, how can we show our emotions in the face of inequity? I also think that it models, as Mary says, it models a vision of what we want to actually see and how we want to be in practice. I think that direct action can be very healing, and also it can be very traumatic, right? And it's because we're putting our bodies on the line for something that we believe is worth it, right? We believe that this future of Black liberation is worth it. So we're willing to put our bodies on the line to do that. And I think that's what's so beautiful about direct action, is that we have the opportunity to do that and to show like our purest emotion in the face of inequity.
Yeah, I'll just add on. For me, I feel like direct action can be very exhausting. It can be physically draining. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so to me, direct action holds all of these possibilities for all types of things that we want to achieve. And also it can be, from where I sit at this stage in my personal development and growth, I feel like direct action must be strategic, and it must be, something you said, Mary, about like the sacrifice that you're gonna make has to be worth it. You know, like what are we doing and is it worth it? And does it move something or not? So I think there's this, you know, this kind of moment we're in, and I'm very much looking to like Minneapolis, Minnesota, all of these, and some of these other cities where, you know, divestment, defunding is happening. But the opportunity to take mass direct action and the power of unwieldy mass direct action and that energy and laser focus it into something that has immediate, tangible outcomes in real time. And so like the story that Oluchi just told about this third precinct was burned down, and then the conversation is getting real, right? The conversation moves. There are things being articulated by lawmakers to say, okay, we're gonna move in this direction now, whether that be symbolic or not. It's something that's on the record. It's something that is something you could hold people accountable to. And so I am really excited about, you know, thinking about direct action as a way to move things very clearly to things we need, because I love marching. You know, sometimes you just gotta rage out in a march. You just wanna get out there and be with people. But we can, you know, we're in a very, you know, a place of escalating crisis. And so our time, our energy, our bodies are so precious. And it just, it's really, to me, at this moment, when I think of like this radical potential of direct action, is the opportunity to be really focused and really clear about what we're doing and really committed to a standard of moving that is worthy of all of the physical things that we will incur from our actions, all of the trauma, emotional fallout that happens after our actions. Like if what we're doing is gonna create all that, we need to push something forward in a real way. So, you know, these particular direct action moments correlating directly to moving something important, like a commitment, a public commitment to defund or divest, to me is like, that holds a lot. And if we can continue to see mass direct action as a place of like a real muscle we flex when something we want, we need to, you know, we can activate it in a way that pushes something in real time. I think we should continue to figure out how that magic is happening.
Thank you. So y'all, it is August 25th. We are inching closer and closer to November 3rd, whether we like it or not. So much about the internal conversation about electoral justice. What are the right tactics? Is elections a total waste of time? Do we just need to go find some land and build a new world? So I'm curious, what is your viewpoint from where you all are standing between Atlanta, New York, and Minneapolis? What is your viewpoint of electoral justice when we're having this larger conversation about directly confronting the state? Many might understand electoral justice to be one of the most traditional forms of political engagement. Do you all see it as that? Is it a waste of time? Is it still critical for us to engage in elections towards the goal of changing the material conditions of people's lives? So I just want us to engage in this, what I know to be an internal battle within my movement spaces of how much time and energy do we give to November 3rd? One of y'all.
Yeah, I mean, November 3rd is so specific, right? Because of you know, the political crisis we're in, the origins of it are in the American project and the origin of the American project. So, but this very clear direction towards explicit fascism has to be dealt with. It has to be dealt with. And you know, what we have is a very uninspiring set of options. But we are not engaging in armed revolution. Like, that's not happening. So as long as we can be honest with ourselves about that, we should start to have some strategic options. And I think, you know, this is a moment, like I said, that just feels very, very consequential for us. And yet the national, it sometimes just feels a little bit deeply, deeply overwhelming. But I think people need to be in a group. If you're not in a group, I feel like you need to get in a group. You know, go get some training, go start getting involved in marches and things like that now. Skill up, learn some skills, find a community, you know, be humble and join something, because that's what we're gonna need, is a lot of formations. And then just on the you know, ideological, philosophical debate around electoral politics or not, you know, I'm someone who's like running for a city council seat. I would love to have been someone in this last June in New York City who was able to vote against a budget that didn't divest, right? There was only like 4 or 5 people out of like 60 or 50 something seats who actually stood up with these movements and said, like, we're not going to vote for a budget that doesn't seriously make these cuts and put money into life-saving programs and services. And so in some ways, it's like, well, what type of city council do you have that even, you know, considers that idea and even is willing to hear you? So there is a strategy there, and some people can engage with it and some people cannot. But I think in order to, you know, to figure out how is your place going to be governed, you've got to get some people in there who are actually willing to engage with you. And I know people hate hearing that, but I just, you know, where are we going with it? You know, you need both. It's a moment of bringing all strategies, all tools, and all of our strengths to bear, really. Check.
Yeah, I think I have more questions than answers for this. I think that as someone who works towards the liberation of all Black people, meaning even the almost more than 80% of Black people that don't live in America, you can't excuse that both of these candidates will further imperialism, and specifically American imperialism that has oppressed Black people all over the globe for centuries and centuries. So it's like, yes, and I also don't think that we'll get to a place of non-participation or non-cooperation where we can actually make some systemic changes. So it's like, yeah, it's hard because it's like we're basically organizing in the belly of the beast. And I don't necessarily have answers of like, I think that November 3rd is necessary, but I do think that what is necessary is that we interrogate the ways that we are actually civically engaged past the elections. Because what happens is we steer people to this specific day, and then after this day, there is no accountability, even in statewide, local, whatever politics, right? So it's like, what are the ways in which we need to like question the ways that we're engaged and we keep people engaged to actually make a difference in politics in general? And I also high key very much so hate electoral politics and electoral organizing. So this is my way of getting out of this question, is just asking more questions and just interrogating the entire system at its whole. So I'll give it to Mary if you want to answer say a little words.
You know, I think that there's a few things that We must grapple with, obviously, like there's some local shit that like has a completely different impact than what the federal government does. And we know, and obviously we know how dangerous they can also be and have been to our people. And so I think that as Sandy was saying, like, yo, we need a multitude of tactics and strategies. Like everything is on the table. Niggas ain't free. What? Try it, do it. You know, and I think when and particularly inside of song, when we were like, yo, let's see what we can do inside of this electoral stuff. You know, a lot of what we were thinking was, one, like sometimes you know, we can be super isolated inside of our ideologies and the way in which we think about the world and our visions and our politics. But it's a different type of conversation when you got to go to the random neighbor to talk about the issues and why they should get behind it and all the things. And so I think it's also, you know, an opportunity, which one, folks should do this all the time. So this isn't just inside of elections, but there's a something special, something in the air in this particular time of the year that allows us or gives, you know, opens up more capacity, I think, to bring people in, to go talk to people who don't usually talk to. And again, this should be happening all year round, right? Civically engaged. But I also think too, when we look at the traditional tactics that people mostly use inside of electoral times, like, okay, kind of, you know, phone banking, door knocking, whatevs. But I think this is also where direct action should be front and center. You know what I mean? Like direct action should be used in the context of elections, right? I think about, we were deeply inspired by the work of our comrades in Puerto Rico, Agi Harte, who was working with other comrades some years ago, and they did a whole campaign, y'all, and they created a fake candidate, and they called him El Nuno, and I believe it translated to nobody's worthy or something like that. It's like nobody. And he would literally, this character, big-headed puppet, would do press conferences, talk about how I ain't gonna do shit for the people as a mockery to those who were running, right? And so I think that we also, this time right now, like, I mean, we can go to the mat and have some really great fun, but also lift the ceiling of what is possible inside of electoral, the tactics that people engage inside of. And I think that we should, you know, certainly be thinking about, yes, we want people to like, vote if you feel so compelled. And, you know, I feel like I'm not here to convince people to do it or not. You know, I think it is, they're trying to steal it from us. It might be something important, you know, that we should leverage. But for those who engage it or not, you know, we had heard from comrades in Florida like 2 weeks ago where they had a primary or a vote was going down, and they're like, a white dude came up in there, like hurling threats and like, I'm coming up to take motherfuckers out. So I feel like there's a, as I was just on a call, and Carissa Lewis was like, yo, even if you don't vote, we damn sure need to be in a position where we can protect those people who are trying to vote. And so we all have a role in this project to make sure that those who are engaging in that tactic are safe while they're doing it. So think about, how do we position ourselves to be able to support people? And we should be doing some deep scenario planning about what happens when this bitch don't leave office. Because that's going to come down the pike, and we need to be thinking about that. I'm sorry, interpreters. I hope y'all can translate all my cuss words. I'm like, I think I just saw her do it. But we need to be thinking about all of those things. But more importantly, it's what happens the day after and the days ongoing, because it's about holding people accountable, regardless of who in there. And voting on a national tip is about deciding who we want to be in a ring with, because as revolutionaries, we're going to fight regardless. Who do we want to throw these hands at? Who do we want to get a smoke to? Who's, you know what I mean? Where's the place where we can have, what's the candidate, the person, whatever, that we can have a fight worthy of our people's time and sacrifice. You feel me? And so those are some of the things that we must consider. And either way, everybody has a role inside of this season of electoral justice that we try.
You see, Mary, you had a great ass answer. I don't even know why you didn't go first.
That was so good. No, all three of you had great answers. First of all three of y'all touched me on that one, as this is such a complicated topic, particularly in this time. But Mary, this idea of, yo, if they're trying to steal it from you, it might be something important to leverage, y'all. That stuck with me. So thank you. So now look, We're gonna move along to pull up some of our Gen Forward data. You know, you're gonna see a lot of Zoom calls in this time. You're gonna see a lot of folks just talking and shooting the talk. But we actually like to land and center our conversations in not alternative facts, but in real, rigorous data facts. Shout out to Professor Dr. Cohen for continuing the Gen Forward Project and for continuing the efforts of Black Youth Project and for helping to start BYP 100. So we appreciate you, Kathy. But let's pull up some of this data and get into some of the real as we talk about both confronting the state, but also what does it mean to do this work in this time. So we're gonna start here. So this question poses, this slide poses the question, in your opinion, what is the best way to make racial progress in the United States? This was this month, August 2020, hot off the press. As you see, young Black folks in this country, and this is for millennials, we're asking this to millennials and Gen Zers. The first answer for young Black folks says revolution. Now we might have to define revolution, but we understand the first response to what's the best way to make racial progress is we need a revolution in this country. The second one for young Black youth, millennials and Gen Zers, nonviolent protests and demonstrations. And the third one, organizing in communities. Next question we're posing on the Gen Forward survey, August 2020. To what degree do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Police are necessary for safe communities. Now look at this closely, y'all. 72% of African-American Gen Zers and millennials said somewhat or strongly agree that police are necessary for safe communities. Asian Americans, so we're doing a comparison analysis here. So we asked this question July 2019, and then we re-asked this question August 2020, so we're able to track this over a year time. So when we asked this of Black youth in July 2019, 72% said, yes, police are necessary. And we actually see that go down 6 percentage points to 66% for Black youth to answer that question in August 2020. Asian Americans last year said 86% agreed, police are necessary for safe communities. It went down to 84%. Latinx communities started at 81%, it went down to 79%. And even in white communities, it started at 88% last year, and it has gone down 6 percentage points to 82%. But as you recognize here, these are pretty high percentages across the board. There's overwhelmingly agreement that police are necessary in safe communities, but follow me here. Let's keep going. Do you believe the funding for your local police department, or the police should be increased, decreased, or kept the same? So in blue, you'll see decreased. Your local police department will be decreased. In orange, you see a decreased budget for the police. So African-American young Black youth, 39% said decrease your local police department, 59% said decrease the police. Asian Americans, 42% decrease your local police department, 47% decrease the police. Latinx, 34%, 41%. White, 34%, 39%. So we are seeing some agreement that we need to decrease your local police department when it comes to funding of the police department and funding of the police. We are seeing that folks do agree that we should decrease funding for police. The next question asks, would you support or oppose creating a new agency of first responders that specialize in de-escalation of violence, providing mental health support and other social services that would take over the responsibilities from police? So we're seeing this question asked to millennials and Gen Zers, what's happening in real time in Alushi's district in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is what young Black youth and Asian American youth and Latinx youth and white youth across the country are answering in this question. And if we only look at how young Black youth are answering this question, 47% are in strong support of totally abolishing police in order to create a new system, a new agency that is going to imagine public safety in new ways. Asian Americans, 47% in agreement, somewhat support 38%. Latinx, we have 42% in agreement. Somewhat support 34%. And as we see here in our last bar graph, way to the right, we see young millennials and young Gen Zers when it comes to young white people. There's also strongly support creating a new system and somewhat support creating a new system. So if we go back here, we're seeing, if you ask the question in a way that says police are necessary for safe communities, everyone is saying, yes, we need police. But if you allow young people to actually say, well, let's reimagine, let's do some imagining of something that can be better, replace it with a new system that's responsible for de-escalation of violence, responsible for providing mental health support, responsible for other social services that would take over responsibilities for police, we're seeing overwhelming agreement across the board, regardless of race, in support of this effort. And finally, do you think police departments in the United States should be defunded or abolished? We see young Black youth saying 38% yes, defund, 21% yes, abolish. Asian Americans, 44% yes, defund, 10% saying yes, abolish. Latinx, 26% yes, defund, 9% yes, abolish. And then young white millennials, young white Gen Zers are saying yes, defund at 32% and yes, abolish at 13%. So that is our Gen Forward data for our Liberate Data webinar. That's some good stuff. I'm gonna kick it to Terry to give us some of your response. And then I would love to see, panelists, how are you all responding to this new data, hot off the press? An overwhelming number of young people saying, look, if we can imagine a new system of public safety, let's do it. What does that mean for this time? Terry?
Yeah, so to sort of just summarize what we've just seen, collectively, this data is a bit contradictory, right? Like, we see strong support for the creation of a new agency that would take over the responsibilities of the police, but then we don't see strong support for police abolition. So, and then on top of that, we see an overwhelming majority of respondents that believe police are necessary for safe communities. So I just want to take a minute to discuss like what is going on here. And more specifically, I just want to ask the panelists, how do these contradictions sort of inform your work as an activist or organizer? And to what extent does it change our approach and our vision for organizing?
Yeah, I can start. As a millennial, it's actually not shocking to me around the data that I saw, because I think that the ways in which we have been conditioned for centuries have really ingrained in us that safety equals police. Right? If I said the word safety and I told you to close your eyes and think of the first thing that you see when you see the word safety, people think of police. And that's not because we think that the police keep us safe. It's because police have been so synonymous with safety that it is ingrained in our system, right? And it's gonna take a lot of fucking work for us to actually transform the ways that we think when we think about safety, right? And I think that that's the reason why we're doing the work. And I always like to tell myself as an organizer, my job is not to get people towards liberation. What my job is to do is to set the conditions where people can actually envision their liberation. And then once you have that vision, you can then see what are the paths forward to actually get to that liberation that I'm looking at, right? So it's like, how do we actually set the condition for people to be able to like say, actually police doesn't equal safety, and if it doesn't, what does, right? Like, how can we then move to a shape in which like we are all safe, community is actually safety, and like we are in right relationship with each other? And I think that takes a lot of work. And I think, Jonathan, the question that you had earlier around transformative justice is, I actually think that that's a framework that we have to be thinking about when we're talking about like, how do we envision a world in which we're all liberated, right? And as transformative justice says, it's like, how do we address harm? And also, what are the systems that made that harm be able to happen in the first place? So like, how are we doing that work to actually set those conditions for people and to be able to envision a world in which they are actually safe?
To me, this reads so clearly, the data shows so clearly that there's just a deep need for more political education, more understanding, more examples, more local opportunities to feel what that feels like to have a space that doesn't feel policed, or to have even social relationships in their families or in their groups, in their schools that don't feel punitive, don't feel like there's punishment in it or emotional or physical violence in it. So I think a lot of it is just like the sensory experience of that, and the political education at the kind of the more like didactic level that helps to further like provide language and like a framework for people to understand, oh, this is what it feels like to not have a policed environment, and this is what the language that kind of relates to. So I think sometimes I think our language can be alienating. Like movement language can be very alienating to many people, and it's okay, we're standing in the truth, we're saying the things that we firmly believe, and then if we're going to do that, we have to then go and make sure we're having the conversation. So I think it's just experience and education. I'm a millennial, I'm 36, but I'm a millennial. I guess I fit into that, so I don't know what that means. But I do feel like, some of these concepts, for me, like, if you asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't be able to talk to you about this with a confidence, or be able to talk to someone else and feel very confident that I could communicate properly, or convince someone who grew up in a neighborhood that had been divested from and had like violence as an outcome. So it's, we have to really, this data is like super illuminating in that way. And it just, to me, just reaffirms what I think many of us know, is that there's just so much more education to be done amongst each other and everyone else that we're trying to build with.
Whew, that data, honey, I took pictures of all the slides, but if y'all could send them, that'd be cool. But I took pictures of all of the slides. I'm like, I need to study this. But what it indicates to me is a few things. One, I feel like, we should always be in the business of checking the pulse. Like, where's the pulse? Where people are at around a particular thing. And I think that this gives us an indication. One, that I think that, in as much as like we want to go wide with people, every state in this colonized country was in uprising, and that's why. But now we have to look at the depth in which we engage folk who came out, So our movements, yes, we want to build power in numbers, but we also, and I don't know how oftentimes we measure the depth in which folks are where we have political alignment, right? But I feel like that's something that, feel like at least the type of organizing that we've been engaged in. When I said I'm talking about Song, I'm talking about InfoBL, local organizations, whatever, around like, okay, let's bring people in. Let's bring people, absorbing people into organization, right? Because some folks like, yeah, I went into a protest and I said, yes, defund. Now I didn't stick around long enough to be like, what do I actually mean by that? What do I actually, So I feel like that also shows us that we, need to continue to absorb folk into organization to do the things that the other comrades spoke to around the political education, et cetera. And I also think too, like, that there's something that I've been desiring, hoping, like we need some good, strong debate in this time, right? Because we oftentimes will write our position, but it ain't good enough people to read your position. We need concrete, principled, intellectual, whatever you want to call it, debate. No, tell me why you think we should keep having a fuzz if they come in guns blazing. Why? Give me your logic, and I think, and help folks to openly process with each other why we are still cleaving to an institution that has meant our people no good. And I think, and again, and so then it's, And I think we can raise the questions that one that just doesn't focus on our current conditions, but also like we know how they got here. We know what they've been responsible for. We have to think through it Sankofa style. You know what I mean? Sankofa style. If in 7 generations we don't want our young people, my great-great-grandchildren, etc., to be staring down the barrel of a police gun, then we must do something right now. And that's why I think that, you know, good, healthy, hearty debate, and also for us to be able to like listen to the folk, do more deeper listening to the folk who are calling the police. My neighbors across the street about 2 weeks ago, somebody was over their house, they were drinking and shit, turned up, didn't invite me that time, whatever. But they came over, somebody got super drunk, was wilding out in the street. They come over, Mary, we need you to call police. I said, Miss Phyllis, girl, you know I'm not finna call the police. So what's the problem, Miss Phyllis? She done got real drunk. I said, well, Miss Phyllis, then, look, she ain't destroyed nothing, okay? She loud. She done, you know, she done hit somebody car with her hand, but it ain't got no damage. Give her some water. Walk her to where she going. Like, it ain't got, you know, because it's going to escalate. And they're like, you right. And so some of it, too, I think is, and it is a slow, steady work that we must be engaged in. We should be doing the numbers, and the data y'all collecting are delicious. And we need to be clocking this for the next 5-10 years, as long as we can. Because it took, how many years to break the backbone of chattel slavery, right? And so we must also be seeing ourselves on a long-term trajectory. I think obviously with technology and many different things, it shouldn't take us that long, but whatever. But I think that we should be thinking about what are the ways in which our slow, steady, respectful organizing, relational organizing is also going to help us shift the hearts and minds of our people. And I do think we need more platforms for broader debate so that folks are in more discourse of people about why we believe what we believe, you know, especially when the bodies on the street give us clear evidence and contradict all of those things, right? And so, and I think it is the showing and not telling. When we can show people, here's an option. Tell them Miss Phyllis, no, but if we get us some water, do whatever, we ain't even got to bring in the smoke or the fuzz. So I think it's also showing and not telling, and being able to show it in a way through our direct action, through our abolitionist practice in real time, that day-to-day, getting up out of your bed when you hear somebody arguing and going and intervening, that type stuff, you know? So honey, we got work to do, but we ain't no ways tied. You know what I mean?
Come on with that. Terry?
Yeah, absolutely. But we're getting to audience Q&A real soon. So I just want to go ahead and remind our viewers to go ahead and send in your questions if you have them. But I do have another question for the panel following up on that great discussion. One of the aims of this webinar is to highlight youth and how they're engaging in politics right now, right? So Sandy, earlier you mentioned the excitement that comes with watching people engage in their first action. And Aluchi, you touched on sort of showing emotion through action and how these actions can be healing or how they can be traumatizing. So I just want to know, how have you all seen youth being politicized, and what forms of direct action have you seen them engaging in?
I'm gonna start again. Yeah, TikTok, like honestly, like TikTok has politicized Gen Z thoroughly. And I'm just like, wow, I'm getting politicized on TikTok. So I think TikTok is a really dope platform that the young folks are using, especially Black youth, to actually like galvanize folks, to politicize folks, to activate folks, to keep folks informed. And I think another action that, you know, I think Jonathan knows a lot about are the street actions that are happening, right? The art actions that are happening, that the retaliation from Mayor Bowser with like Black Lives Matter, but equals defund the police, right? And then one that just happened in San Francisco that said Black trans lives matter. So like these art actions are also ways of direct action that are not like, oh, this is hella traumatic, but they're like very healing, and it shows the emotion of the moment and all of these things, right? So those are just a couple of things that I can think of off the top of my head.
I'm posting the Twitter account from some of the, what Mary would call the deliciousness of actions that have taken place. for young Black folks around the country doing some street art actions, trying to get the messaging of defund and abolish the police out there. It was launched in DC, but some of my beloved comrades out of Atlanta threw down. We have some New York folks throwing down for the street art. So it really has been a beautiful summer as far as the culture goes. But kicking it back to Sandy and Mary to answer Terry's question.
I was just gonna say, in New York City, with the kind of the uprising and people, during what I'm calling peak COVID in New York City, when we still had, the refrigerator trucks outside of the hospitals, people were coming out in droves. I mean, marches and marches and marches were conflicting with other marches. You couldn't get across to the other side of the bridge to get to your march because there's a march blocking something happening. Like, direct action is preventing you to get to your direct action. But the amazing thing about it was, I felt like every time I joined a march, I just would see young Black folks at the front, and I didn't recognize them. Not that I know, everybody, but it just, there's usually the universe gets smaller as you get in the direct action space. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was seeing people calling marches on Facebook, on whatever, and it's just like anybody could call something. And so there was the digital space, TikTok or whatever, was able to create an opening for young Black folks to just like assert leadership in this moment. And then, there was in New York City, one of the biggest marches that I was on was planned by two Black women who were not formally a part of any organizing, any base building orgs, and that became the Millions March in New York City. So, and that was huge. I mean, eventually a bunch of folks who had like some DA experience showed up and supported, but anybody could call something in this moment. And I think that's kind of the power of right now, and why we're seeing these actions feel like so strong, is because anybody's doing it. You don't have to, it doesn't feel like the kind of the old school way where you have to give deference to the group that's been working on an issue the longest. It feels like if you're feeling it and you feel called, you can do it, and people will show up. So in some ways there's like challenges to that, and then in other ways it's beautiful, right? I'm still figuring out how to get on TikTok, so I think my millennial card needs to be taken back. But I think the digital organizing space is like, I'm so excited that that's actually translating into things happening on the ground. So.
Yeah, I think it was really smart. What was it TikTok the homies used to like buy up the tickets and stuff during the Trump rally sitch around in June? I was like, that's great, because I think what also is important is that we want to engage the targets. We want to be giving them the smoke. I mean, yes, we want folks to like come out and march and like protest and turn up. And I'm like, but if you doing that at the Capitol when it's closed, there ain't nobody there. You know what I mean? Let's rethink this. But to be able to have the wisdom and insight to be like, actually, we can do a COVID safe. Somebody asked like, how do I engage in a question? That was a great one. How do I engage in a place and engage in direct action that literally like puts pressure on the target, shapes the target, whatever, without leaving my home? That's a great example. What do they have in events? Do that research, and I think that, there's so many good tactics and different ways in which people have, used and thought about this moment, right? The car caravans, folks like, oh, can't be out, but I'll get in my car and hump till it's going out of style until I run out of gas. You know what I mean? And so I feel like there's many different ways in which I've seen young people show up and be creative and bring all the monument snatching down of monuments, defacing monuments, like the whole nine. And so I think that, you know, what I feel like the role of those of us who have engaged in direct action, and so much that we've been taught by so many formations. I think of, you know, I know personally Agi Harte, who have poured inside of Songs Base and others, Blackout Collective, Ruckus Action, and so many. I know some folks wanted the Greenpeace trainings and stuff, you know what I mean? But there's so many like different practitioners that come with so many different skills. And right now I feel like our work and role is to continue to offload those skills, and to be like, okay, now young people, now teach us about this TikTok shit. Teach me, tell me what the fuck, you know, please do a little TA with us. I do have an account, but I haven't quite figured out how I want to master it. You know, and to engage directly with the target, because I like to throw them hands in person. So I got to figure that out, you know. But yeah, I think that it's a high time to push people to the edge of our fears, so our people continue to push, you know.
Thank you so much, Mary. Terry, go ahead. I'm still trying to figure out how to use TikTok too, y'all. I'm 30 years old. I'm gonna get there one day, but I don't even got an account on TikTok, to be quite honest.
Whoa,
so
I got an
Me
account
neither.
up with y'all.
Dang.
All right, so I think this is a good time to go ahead and transition to some questions from the audience. We're running a little short on time here, so just kind of following up on this discussion of, you know, pushing and getting people engaged. A question that we had from the audience was, and Mary, you touched on this, but maybe we can hear from everyone else. What can direct action look like if you aren't in a position where you can go out and put your body on the line for change? Sandy or Lucci, when
Well,
do you
I
want
was
to take
gonna say Mary had a great example, like the folks who
Yeah.
bought those tickets. That was like,
Yeah.
that was dope. Like, it embarrassed this man. I mean, and it just, I mean, because I'm not on TikTok, I didn't know what was happening, but it just felt like it just came out of nowhere. It was like, oh, this is like, that's amazing. And it was, I imagine if I had bought that ticket, I would be laughing for days. So I'm sure there was so much joy and humor in that. So I think there's, and again, like Mary was saying, there's so many skill sets in an action. There's so many roles to play. There's comms, there's, you know, now social media. There's just like so many ways you don't have to be on the ground, but you are directly supporting and instrumental in an action and important in that action.
All right.
I was gonna just ditto everything. So
That's cool. We got
digital
other
action is next.
we got other questions from the audience, and Aluchi, we will start with you on this one. Antonio from our audience is asking, curious what the panelists think about the role of direct action against property, particularly in the context of the long-standing outside agitator trope in aiding or challenging movement growth and success. Aluchi, we'll start with you on this.
Wow, you would give me this question as a start. Yeah, I think the outside agitator trope has been always used to divide leftist movements for a very long time with anarchy. And like this quote unquote, what is a peaceful protester or what is a violent protester, right? So yeah, I think that we have to call into question the importance of property, right? So like, why is it that like property is even being defended or like policed over people in general? So like, why is there such a hard protection on property? So when we look at like the folks who are tearing down statues, who are defacing statues, and like the gross amount of like time that they're serving for that, it's like we all know that like the police are protecting property and not people, right? I think I saw a case of like someone who spray painted like something is getting like a ridiculous like 25 years for like defamation or something like that in Seattle when the Seattle protests were happening. So yeah, I think it's like it's a tool that's used to really divide movements and like say, oh, this is like on this side, it's like, hey, this is like outside agitation that like a radical group is doing. And then on the other side, it's like, this is what protesters do, is that they're violent and that they cause damage in their communities.
Does anyone Mary, can speak to the question of property? Go ahead, Mary.
Let me say this. No, but I be like, when people like, I was on a call with some folks from other last week, and they were like, the peaceful protest, I'm here for that. But let me quit with the bullshit. None of this shit is peaceful because the people ain't got peace, period. We don't. And so we should stop pretending like that is a possibility, right? Our demeanor could show otherwise, depending on, again, a strategic tone that we decided to set. You feel me? But ain't no damn peace. So that's one. And then two, and I heard a comrade, I forget who said it, but was like, yo, you want to come and talk about property destruction? All right, you bring back the life of the person who was killed and we'll pay for the building. Until then, shut the hell up. Shut up, because you can't. And so that goes to what you were saying, Alucci, like, yo, ain't no debate here. Apples and oranges, shut up, we'll take it out again. And I think that we have to also interrogate too, and one of the elders was bringing this to me, I was like, ooh, good point. I don't know how to deal with it. But they were like, you isolate too, because it's not only a protest and direct protest, I'll say. Oftentimes, when they're not playing, whatever, there are folks who we're trying to get a smoke to our targets, but then there are also folks who are watching from at home, from the TV sets, and they're like, oh my God, they're tearing up the target, Lord have mercy. And so what it might also do, what we have to be mindful of, and I haven't quite figured out the medicine for this, but we got to be mindful of how we not isolate those very people we want to bring into movement, And I don't know what the sweet spot is of that yet. I'm not saying we shouldn't do what we do, because we do what needs to be done. And we know that not all the Negroes burned down a plantation. So some of them ain't gonna come no way. However, there are folks that we do want to bring in, and we do want to, if we go and knock on the doors, and then later on they're like, weren't y'all the same ones on the news that was doing whatever? And now y'all saying, like, damn, okay, all right, let's figure out, so we're holding all of those contradictions or those tensions. But I think that, some of these things that we shouldn't play into ourselves, good protests, the bad protests, and all of that sort of mess. And we should never, we here in Atlanta, we had like a little crew up, like, that's one thing we not going to do. We're not going to say, well, the one Saturday was the bad one, but then the one on Sunday going to be good. Like, no, we're not going to play into that. And I think that oftentimes you hear the city leadership oftentimes say, like, it's the outside agitators that are doing this, as if the people in Atlanta ain't pissed. No, this is homegrown rage, honey. No, I got this shit by living here. You know what I mean? I feel like that's something that too we need to further impress, right? And how we continue to localize our rage, our dissatisfaction on the way governance has happened, on the conditions of our people, and not allow them to be like, yes, outside agitators doing that. No, we mad and live here. You know what I mean? I am your constituency, because that also, I think, disempowers the local people who are here, who are fighting and struggling. Like we've been mad. We've been giving you the smoke before the television and the TVs covered it. Before the news came out, we've been giving you the smoke. And so I think that all of those things can be true, and we got to hold on to all of them. But yeah, we can't let them steal our work and our energy and our righteous anger,
Amazing response. Thank you so much for that. And following up on this notion of saving your energy, Amber Butts had an amazing question, because we've talked a lot about engagement and taking action. But I think this question is fantastic and is essential for any discussion about political action. So the question was, how are you all taking care of yourselves in this moment? And what is helping to ground you and keep you activated? My grandmother was my first entry point into everyday transformative disruption. What modeled it for you all?
We got about 2 minutes left, so quick, but how are y'all taking care of yourselves?
Y'all go first.
I'm not, to be completely honest. Working 12-hour days. But first, for transformative disruption, my grandma also as well. She was from Nigeria. Didn't speak a lick of English, still didn't speak a lick of English. And I was like, wow, that's you like fucking up the state and like continuing to like have your indigeneity and like your language and not conforming to what America wanted you to be. So that was like my first instance of transformative disruption.
Mm-hmm.
Self-care, I don't know, taking care sometimes just means like, I'm not going to this thing, you know, like turning off the desire to be in something that I know I'm just gonna be like it's gonna drain me for the things that I really really need to show up for. The less sexy stuff, you know, the nitty-gritty behind the scenes stuff of making sure, you know, people know where they need to be so they can be a part of something, you know, that kind of stuff. Sometimes just saying no, like I gotta lay down, you know, drink water, just relaxing.
Yeah. I think my my collective care practice is because I'm being held by a lot of beautiful Black women. Real talk. A lot of beautiful Black women who are in my world and in my space who be like, Negro, we see you. I'm sending you some lunch. You know what I mean? And I get the pleasure of being able to, you know, to reciprocate that, right? And so we're collectively seeing each other. Because there are some times where I'm like, yo, I could go all day. It's nothing, you know? And my spirit feels like that. Like literally my spirit is like, stay on green. And sometimes my body like, bitch, slow it down. You ain't got it like that no more. And so I feel like I'm always having to grapple with, you know, that balance. But as Sandy was saying, practicing the sacred yes. What is the sacred yes? You know what I mean? As Bo, we talk about, don't waste Black people time. You know, like how do you do things that honor your time and your commitments that you can show up well for, and be honest about the stuff you cannot, and not also, and be able to like pass on things and not drop the ball, but pass it on. You feel me? And not be reckless. Because sometimes you're like, I'm out. And then you dip for 6 months, we ain't seen you. I was practicing self-care. No, you should have, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to damage the work by how you dip too, you know? So, but and being a part of organization and being organized and doing collective work with people allows for that to happen. So you don't feel like you're holding it all. There's other people who got their hand on the plow too. So it's not just you holding all the things.
Wow, wow, wow. Such a beautiful panel. You all are truly my family, I must say. It's been a joy throwing down Aluchi, Mary, Sandy, throwing down with all of y'all during the 2020 uprising. So to close out this conversation, we have a special video for you all. It's only 60-second long, so stay tuned. But before we play that video, I really want you all to share out the lives from this discussion. This was, you know, as Mary would say, this was too delicious to keep it to yourself. Too delicious. Too many good words of wisdom and love and joy and appreciation. Too much good data from the Gen Forward survey. Shout out to Dr. Kathy Cohen for that. So please, we will post that link in the chat box one more time. We want you all to retweet and share this conversation so we can get this knowledge far and wide, and we will see you all on the streets. Coming to you now, middle finger to the law.
Oh, this my shit, y'all.
Middle finger to the law. To the plug. Middle finger to the law. Middle finger to the law. To the plug.
Oh, good.
so much. We appreciate you. Stay tuned. Look, next Thursday, we have a wonderful next discussion about Black youth voters in the 2020 election. We have Kathy Cohen coming and gonna speak to y'all. We have Melissa Harris Perry. We have Mercedes Fulbright. We got other folks. We got Rashad Robinson from Color and Change. So tune in. We love you all. We appreciate you. Go and be well. Terry, final word.
Yes, I just want to say that we will be sending out a follow-up email with ways to get involved. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email at dataliberationproject@gmail.com. I just want to say a quick and final thank you to everyone who made this possible, our brilliant speakers. Thank you to Rodney and Roy for the interpretation, and all of you who have tuned in. We're super grateful to have been in conversation with you tonight. So if you want to keep up with us, please make sure to follow us on social media. The handles are in the chat. We'll send that in the email as well. But like Jonathan said, tune in on Thursday. Stay tuned for more information about our next webinar. And thank you all for tuning in. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.
Peace, y'all. Love you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.